Somebody paid to keep the microphone off.
Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Bartlesville City Council, Monday, November the 7th. First item of business is the roll call. Mike?
Here. Vice Mayor Curry.
Here.
Mr. Dorsey.
Here.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Ms. Round. Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. Item number 3 is our invocation. This evening is being provided by Pastor Joe Koloff, first person in the church. There you go. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Let's join together in prayer, please. Thank you. Heavenly Father, you Scriptures as our guide for direction. Thank you for your love and grace to us. Thank you for allowing us to call upon you in our times of need. Thank you for the many blessings we experience and the help you give us through the hardships of life. We need you. The Holy Bible reveals that you work in the heart of government leaders, and furthermore, it commends us to pray for those in authority who make the decisions as governmental leaders. We are by nature inclined to seek after our own sinful ways. Forgive us. We have an inclination to call good evil and evil good. Forgive us. You reveal that you will bless those who seek you and honor your ways. So tonight we pray for your insight, understanding, and wisdom. Tomorrow, our city, state, and nation will enter the polling places of America. For years we have voted, theoretically polling to the right or to the left. Today it seems as though we are almost voting to choose between right and wrong. Give us your discernment to vote for principles that are right, righteous, and just. Give us the courage to vote for principles over vain personalities and promises. Help those who are elected to lead with wisdom and integrity from the rooms of City Hall or to the halls of Congress. Please fill us with a heart of love, a kindness toward one another, and a desire to pursue that which is just and righteous. Help us to love our neighbor as ourselves and honor you in all that we do. And for tonight, O God, by the power of your Holy Spirit, be in the heart and the mind of each one of our city councilors and our citizens. May your wisdom prevail as discussions proceed. May your will be done here on earth as it is ordained in heaven. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior, and your Son. Amen.
Amen.
Like I said, I appreciate everybody being here tonight. Last month, after the citizens to be heard, we did our proclamations. One of them was Child Abuse Awareness Month, and the other was Mental Health Awareness Month. This was all after we had several speakers come up and suggest that children would be better dead than at pride events. So I would just...
Never happened. Never happened. Never happened.
I would just like to ask...
No one said that. Nobody said that. That's a lie. That's not true.
The council member is speaking.
No one
If we
said
cannot
that.
have order, if we cannot have order, we will clear the room, and I do not want to do that. Please.
I would just like to ask that any speakers tonight could just consider that there's probably thousands of people watching this at home or that will watch it later. Some may have mental health issues and some may have a propensity to violence. And I would just like you to consider that when you come up here to speak. And with that, again, whatever you say, it's entirely your prerogative. Just wanted to raise that awareness there.
Our next item is citizens to be heard. We have a large list. That is a good thing, but I did last month, and I want to take a moment to commend the group that was here last month, and perhaps many of you did comport themselves with dignity and respect, and we maintained the kind of demeanor that I expect in our community. I want that to happen again this time. So, I'm going to go through a few things. Some of you may not have come to city council meetings. You may not be familiar with the process. First thing was you had to sign in. We have quite a few of those people. It is required that you provide your name and your residential address. With the exception of one name, everyone did that. When that person is called, I will ask them if they're willing to provide their residential address. Otherwise, we will move on to the next speaker. You share your comments with the council. We're here to hear you. We're not here to discuss. It's not a question and answer period. We want you to be aware of the 3-minute limit. You'll notice, especially if you're standing at the podium, that here at the front, this is something that's new. In the past, we have relied on someone, me usually, maintaining a timer, which was not the best solution. So the city manager will operate this, which is mirrored here. This will remain green until 1 minute is left of your 3 minutes. It will become a yellow-orange. And then at 15 seconds, it will become red, and you'll know that you need to wrap up. 3 minutes, I will ask you to complete, probably by saying thank you. So be aware of that limitation. We have a lot of people who want to give everybody a chance to speak. The last piece I would reiterate is that I expect and we will require respect and decorum tonight. Otherwise, people cannot hear. That's not appropriate. It does remain a possibility to clear the room if that becomes necessary. I don't think that'll be necessary, but please be respectful. So, with that being said, let's move into our citizens to be heard. First person who signed up is Reverend Kelly Becker. Good evening.
My name is Reverend Kelly Becker. I am the Senior Minister of Disciples Christian Church and a member of the Oklahomans for Equality Bartlesville Board. At the October City Council meeting, citizens expressed both their support for and opposition to the drag queen performance at Pride. Several opposed struggled to stay on point as their remarks strayed from their stated concern over drag queens to what appeared to be their real concern: the existence, humanity, and rights of people in the LGBTQIA+ community, a community that is an important part of Bartlesville. They are nonprofit leaders, teachers, spouses, parents, first responders, and owners and employees of businesses on which our local economy hinges. Treating them as if they are a problem to be solved, or as if their very existence is wrong or shameful, is homophobic, transphobic, and highly inappropriate in this space or any space. As an ordained Christian minister, I was especially frustrated as people used the Bible to support their homophobia and transphobia. Many Christians, biblical scholars, and theologians, including me, interpret the text differently than the opposition speakers. I am not going to spend time refuting each text used, although I could, because the truth is, each one of us has the right to believe what we want to believe. But what we do not have the right to do is force our beliefs on other people or use what we believe to dehumanize our neighbors. The Bible, while it is a sacred text of Christianity, is not so for other faith traditions or for matters of public policy and governance. Faith leaders should be guarding the line between church and state, not trying to blur it. Unlike most opposition to the drag show, I was present. All the drag queens were covered by at least what would be expected at a public pool. Certainly, if they hadn't been, videos would be circulating widely. They aren't because they don't exist. The queens are entertainers who expressed part of themselves through art and music. Every parent has the
thankful to BPD for their willingness to help us and provide security. I felt they did an excellent job serving our community. I now call upon the Bartlesville City Council to do what you were elected to do. Uphold the rights of all Bartlesville citizens to be treated equally. Everyone should have access to public spaces so long as they are within the bounds of the law. And we as a city should not seek to limit the rights of citizens based on our own personal moral code, but rather what is fair and just for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I believe Hillary complained. Yes, thank you. Good evening.
Mayor Copeland and esteemed city council members, thank you for your time. I am not an important person in this town. I do not belong to a legacy family. I don't own a business. I am not from here. However, Bartlesville has become my home. It is important to me to be a good neighbor. I care about this town and the people who live here, and it is my ardent hope that the city council will not stoop to participating in the divisive, unneighborly, unkind, and damaging rhetoric being peddled around the recent Pride event. There's a very simple reason for the vitriol being spread about my friends and neighbors. Outrage is a very effective fundraiser. It is no accident that the most vocal voices for the manufactured and curated outrage around Pride also benefit financially from the division they sow. Grifters of all stripes utilize this tactic every day. Political wannabes and bigots and bully pulpits know that manufactured outrage is financially lucrative. Nothing fills campaign coffers and Sunday collection plates faster than sowing division and hatred. I appeal to the City Council's better angels and hope that this council will recognize the grift that is tearing our neighbors apart as the dirty trick that it is. I was at Pride, and I am completely unashamed of participating in a lovely, family-friendly event. The only predatory behavior my family experienced was a local pastor putting his hands on my minor son to detain him as he went to collect blankets from our car. Our friends were cold, and we had blankets in the trunk he wanted to share. We absorbed constant verbal abuse from outsiders, invited to Pride in order to incite division by the aforementioned grifters, disgusting and explicit print material being handed out, unwanted physical touch from pastors, cyberbullying targeting minors, and an entire city council meeting filled with depraved fantasies of being drowned by having millstones tied around our necks. My friends have endured a campaign of terror incited by local grifters. One of my friends has a designated drawer for death threats. I would ask the council members who is being a good neighbor, who is sowing hate, and who is benefiting from causing division. I sincerely urge the council members to recognize the right of every citizen to lawfully use public spaces and underscore the right of every citizen to stay home if the lawful use of public spaces offends their personal sensibilities. I sincerely urge those buying into the grift of manufactured outrage that targets LGBTQIA++ community to put their energies into being better neighbors and to stop sowing hate and division.
Next slide is Peter Johnson. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I'm Peter Johnson, pastor of Hope Presbyterian Church, and I sincerely thank you for the opportunity to address this council. As I begin, I want to be careful that my tone is properly perceived. Although my address to you may be frank and forthright, it is also one of personal humility and respect for the office you hold. When you assumed this office, each one of you took a solemn oath to defend the constitutions of both the United States and the state of Oklahoma. You also solemnly swore to discharge the duties of your office with fidelity. As a 25-year veteran of the United States Army, I know the importance of solemn oaths. Oaths exist because leadership can be fraught with enormous pressures. Pressures to conform or compromise. Pressures to avoid making the hard, correct decisions and to justify taking the path of least resistance. And it's no secret that our present culture is full of pressures to conform. Those that counter certain areas face a whole host of derogatory names and labels others will place on them, as well as censorship and perhaps a lawsuit. But despite these pressures, the vast majority of the citizens in Bartlesville are looking to you for moral leadership. They are baffled that we are even considering drag queen shows as public, family-friendly entertainment. They know that it is common sense that adult men dressed in a sexually provocative manner as gross over-characterizations of women is not appropriate public entertainment. They're aware that a previous public drag show advertised as family-friendly with children present displayed a neon sign with the statement, "It won't lick itself." This is nothing less than the insidious grooming of our children. Is this the future legacy for Bartlesville? That's the question the majority of the citizens are asking you. There is no neutral ground on this issue.
Amen.
Public drag shows are either lewd and indecent, or they're not. A lack of courage is the only reason this issue seems complicated and nuanced. The majority of the citizens in Bartlesville are looking to you for courageous leadership to uphold what is good, what is true, what is beautiful for our city, regardless of the pressures. Solemn oaths remind us to stay the course regardless of the cost. So as Christians, we say to one another, remember your baptism. In the Army, we say, you raise your right hand. What I am respectfully calling you to do this evening is to remember your solemn oath and to remember it with the heart of a lion. Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Members of the City Council, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I believe it's wise for the governing body of a city to view its role in light of history. So I ask you to consider this. Aristotle's two books, Ethics and Politics, go together. Ethics comes first, but does not stand alone. It sets the foundation for the successor volume, the Politics. And in these two books, Aristotle poses an important question. The question is this: what ethical practices are essential for the happiness of a city? Or to put this another way, what ethical habits are essential for the thriving of a town? And that's the larger question before you tonight. What constitutes public good for this great city that we love, especially when we consider our children and the parents who love them, and what's good for the parents who love their kids and seek to preserve the value of childhood innocence? One of the things we know is clearly harmful to the thriving of our city is the normalization of adult sexual amusement presented to children, for children, in public places. These forms of sexual entertainment not only divide our city and upset our families, they confuse our children. Children want and need adults who will lead them, especially adults who confirm biological reality, not negate what the children already know to be true through common sense. Moreover, this type of entertainment often spirals down into a progressively more lewd direction. What the planners consider mild one year becomes increasingly toxic in years to come. Does this kind of culture promote the civic thriving envisioned by the great political theorists of the past, from Aristotle to Adams to John Locke and many others? John Adams declared that our Constitution was made for a moral people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. We could say the same about our city. Healthy civic functioning must be founded on moral discretion and the protection of children. It is my belief and the belief of the majority in this city that strongly pushing moral boundaries in public where kids are present is the opposite of virtue and does not advance the common good. It is my belief, and the belief of many others in this city, that public drag queen shows are not good for our city, nor should they be held in public places in our city. Thank you.
Next is Beth Flowers. Good evening. You have to move that mic a little bit to fit you.
I'm too short.
You're not as tall as those last ones.
I'm not as tall as Leslie.
Make sure everybody, it should just pull down, I believe. There you go. Make sure everybody can hear you.
Good evening. I'm Beth Flowers. I grew up here in Bartlesville. My husband is retired military, and we have lived all over the world, and we chose Bartlesville to retire. I stand here tonight on behalf of my 91-year-old mother, Barbara Garrison. My mother was born here in Bartlesville on 2nd Street and has lived here her entire life. My mother was devastated to learn of the previous event held at Unity Square. My mother is suffering from dementia, and it was difficult for me to explain it all to her. Her questions were these: who is protecting our children? Who and how did the city council vote to let this happen? I have a theater background and have been involved in many productions from Morocco to West Point. La Cage aux Folles happens to be one of my favorite musicals. These performers have the right to assemble and perform, but Unity Square is not the venue for this entertainment. There is nothing about having a drag show with children in the audience unifying. This city council must use common sense to ensure this will never happen again. My mother's next question was, how did we get here? You ask yourselves, how did we get here? And what could I have done to prevent this divisiveness? It is your responsibility to represent all Bartians and to foresee and prevent future decisions that would further divide our special city. I have lived in Paris, Honolulu, Rabat, Austin, and Monterey, California, and I still say this is the best city I have ever lived in. Please, let's keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Pauls. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Ben Pauls. I'm here to address the recent petition that made claims that the drag performance at the Bartlesville Pride event contains sexual provocation and would have been better suited for a strip club. First, I would like to say that the people of Bartlesville, at their best, can be very neighborly, service-oriented, and kind. I do not believe this petition reflects that spirit at all. It baselessly accuses a G-rated drag show of containing sexual provocation suited for a strip club when, in fact, no obscenity, nudity, or sexually charged content was present. The event was extremely well organized, well attended, and very obviously family-friendly for anyone in attendance. And an online petition insinuating vulgarity is not only unneighborly, it flirts very closely with libel. This type of response to a legal public event distracts from the ways that the people of Bartlesville are actually engaging constructively with one another across differences. Second, I would like to say that the content that a child is exposed to has the power to challenge, teach, comfort, entertain, and inspire, but it also has the power to mislead, threaten, discourage, and scar them. It is important to know the difference. This is especially important for parents and those of us who work with children and hold positions of public influence. Reading Bible verses about a mandate to drown people with millstones at a city council meeting, openly celebrating people dying of AIDS, and baselessly accusing an entire group of people of committing sexual crimes using very inflammatory language, all demonstrate a total lack of care or consideration for what may be appropriate for a child, not to mention the atrocious example it sets for civic engagement. Lastly, we can do better as a community at large. If you sign the petition, it may be more fruitful to rebuild some of the trust you might have broken with your family and friends than to try to convince the city that discriminating would be a good idea. The people of Bartlesville are not going to stand idly by while people sign a libelous petition against their neighbors, chant disgusting slogans at them, read Bible verses about drowning them, and baselessly accuse them of sexual misconduct. We will stand up for them while others spread lies, defend violence, name-call, and bully them. And I hope that we will all be able to witness that this municipal body will not cave to their loud and angry voices. Instead, I hope we will see a city council dispassionately recognize that this event did not violate anything in the city code, and to write something in so that it never happens again, as the petition requests, is beneath the dignity and purpose of this body. And we will move forward together despite everything some of these pastors and other community members are doing to mislead, threaten, discourage, and scar our kids. To our queer neighbors, we will support your well-being, your education, your personal interests and achievements, and your involvement in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Mayor Copeland, Vice Mayor Kurd, Council Members Dorsey, Stewart, and Roan, Mr. Bailey, Mr. Kane, Ms. Baines, and Captain Newell. Thank you for having us. My wife and I moved here 2.5 years ago, and I've had the opportunity to attend in person 27 of the last 28 city council meetings, and that one absence I was able to avail myself to via live stream. I've attended additional public meetings outside the monthly one, numerous strategic planning meetings, and had the privilege of serving on the City Planning Commission. I've also been privileged to get to know each of you outside of those meetings, including on city streets, at parks, community events, restaurant shops, and elsewhere. I'm here to express my sincere gratitude for the tireless commitment of our city council members and city staff. I suspect the average citizen has no idea of the amount of time between these various meetings devoted to operating our city with integrity and purpose. For example, I know firsthand the extraordinary effort to prepare and execute an annual budget. I appreciate the transparency that all the business of the city is available all the time to all of us as citizens through the city website. I appreciate that, from my experience, every one of you on the dais is approachable, listens to the concerns of citizens, and has Bartlesville's best in mind. Not every city is managed as well as Bartlesville, Oklahoma. I suspect the majority of people in attendance tonight are interested in one particular agenda item. Over the past month, I've sought to quell any disgruntlement or opinions about action or perceived lack of action on that one item. Any perception that you've been silent is far from the truth. Perception in this case is not reality, and I believe you've been acting prudently to ensure sufficient time and attention is given to the concerns of the community, legal matters, and more. I know some, if not all, of you have received calls about the one item, not only from Martians, but also others beyond our city and beyond our state. The recent council candidate forum gave candidates an opportunity to speak to the item. My synopsis of their response is that it is very important to get this right. I agree. Therefore, I encourage you to take the time you need, don't feel pressured to make rushed decisions, and neither drag your feet unnecessarily. I believe I represent many in our city who have utmost confidence in our city council and city staff. Pray for you daily and genuinely value your representation as citizens and your devotion to Bartlesville. I hope that as citizens we will demonstrate respect and patience, get the facts right before spouting opinions, and trust the process alongside you. I only have one disappointment to express tonight. That is that agenda item number 5 is not at the end of the agenda to give this fine gathering of citizens the opportunity to experience the typically mundane and often boring meetings that are taken business and ensures our city is run well. May God bless you and continue to guide you with wisdom and favor in all you do to the world. Thank you, Mr. Warren.
Thank you, sir. Billy, I don't think we've ever been allotted for dull meetings. Next is Thomas Lowry. Good evening.
Good evening. You need my address?
I have it here.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah, I can read them out if people are interested. Just, it's a requirement. Doesn't have to read them, we just have to have them.
Okay. Well, thankfully this will be over soon. You get back to Monday meetings at some point soon. My name is Thomas Lowry. I'm senior pastor at Calvary Chapel, Bartlesville. I'm here as a shepherd overseeing a flock with concern over the events that occurred last month. Obviously, you've gone through strong deliberation.
The clock's not started.
Oh. Thank you for catching that. It's a good idea.
He's a pastor. He can keep going.
You've got to restrain guys like me.
Thank you.
I'm sure that you've had lots of time to deliberate. Hopefully some of that deliberation has got into the legal issue at hand, which really boils down to one side saying that this was not obscene and the other side saying it was obscene. And that speaks to the period interest that is in the 3-part Miller test, which you have listed in the community standards, which is the litmus test for whether something is obscene or not. That has been litigated a lot, and decisions have been made in the Supreme Court that allude to that, such as Reno v. ACLU in 1998, which talks about obscenity towards children, which is not protected free speech. So the question then is, what is obscenity? Which gets litigated more and more and more. United States v. Williams 2008 determined that pandering is obscene. Pandering is the enticement of children towards sexual interests. Okay, so the question is, are drag queens and at a pride event a sexual interest? And I'll point you just to the ideology. LGBT. Let's start with the first one. Lesbian. Women who prefer to have sexual intercourse with women. Gay. Men who prefer to have sexual intercourse with men. Bisexual. Men or women who choose to have sex with men and women. That is sexual in its nature. That's not a debatable issue or concern. Those who participated in that, the drag queens, a quick Facebook research reveals that 2 of those drag queens work at the C4 nightclub, a nightclub that had, in July 2021, a separate LGBT group that came to protest them for sexual assaults that happened at the club. Accusations have been made of drugging and sexual assaults in that club. These drag queens were brought into contact with children in our community. Interesting. You say, well, probably none of the children from your church were there, so why does it bother you? Those children go to school the next day. They engage on the playground, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And declarations that, well, I think I'm attracted to you, or I'm attracted to this person or that person. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, it was about football, sports cards, riding my bicycle. Why does sexual interest need to be introduced to children? That is no secret. Thank you.
Next is Carolyn Morgan. Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight about the drag queen event. I believe that this type of event should not be held in a public venue. It was adapted to be family friendly, but if it had to be adapted, what was it before? And why are drag queens being promoted to children all over our nation? Why do children need exposure to this? But more importantly, why do drag queens feel the need to perform in front of children or hold events with them? The answer, according to Manhattan Institute fellow Christopher Rufo, lies in understanding the true nature of the drag queen story hour and the ideology that drives it. He researched the history of drag and the development of academic queer theory. I'm using his research. The premise of this ideology is that sex and gender are socially constructed and should be deconstructed because they are human inventions used as instruments of power to oppress racial and sexual minorities. The publication of Gender Trouble by Judith Butler suggests a theory of social change based on performance art. Drag performances are a Trojan horse hiding the true agenda. The key figure was Harris Kornstein, stage name Little Miss Hot Mess, who hosted some of the original readings in public libraries. He believes that drag performances for children can be used to create a site of queer pleasure for children and to overcome the false notion of childhood innocence. Kornstein and Harper Keenan published the manifesto for the movement, Drag Pedagogy, the playful practice of queer imagination in early childhood. The purpose of this teaching method is to stimulate queer imagination, teaching kids how to live queerly and bringing queer ways of knowing and being into the education of young children. As they explain, this is an intellectual and political project that requires drag queens and activists to work toward undermining traditional norms of sexuality. Though drag queen story hours and other such events are billed as family friendly, Kornstein and Keenan explain that this is a form of code. Many claim that these programs are designed to foster LGBTQ acceptance and inclusion. They dismiss these objectives as pure marketing language that provides cover for their real agenda. The purpose is to reformulate children's relationship with sex, sexuality, and eroticism.
This movement wants to destroy traditional heterosexual norms and ultimately abolish restrictions on the behavior of those currently referred to as minor attractive persons. Drag performances provide a visual, symbolic, and erotic method for achieving this. As our city leaders, you are the gatekeepers and need to understand this ideology. Drag performances do not belong in public square because of their own stated goals are to indoctrinate children into queer culture and deconstruct the traditional biblical model of sexuality in the family unit.
Thank you. John? There he is. Good evening, sir.
My name is John Lindblom, and I live here in Bartlesville. I wanted to speak tonight and share my perspective on the use of public parks here in Bartlesville in relation to the Pride event in September. I love this community. I love the people in this community. I love the organizations and the businesses in this community. I love supporting this community. Above all else, I love how this community rallies together and supports each other when we need it most. We really have something special here in Bartlesville. Having said all this, I have to tell you that my heart hurt and continues to hurt after hearing some of the comments from our last city council and today's. That was not and is not the representation of Bartlesville that I know and love. Among many other things said, I heard the verse from Matthew from multiple people implying that it would be better to have a millstone tied around your neck and be drowned than support the LGBTQ community and its allies. Think about that for a second. Seriously.
That's what the Bible says.
Is this how we really feel about other human beings in our community? My friends in the LGBTQ community volunteer for our nonprofits, work for our local businesses, work in our city government, and yes, also pay taxes to help fund our local parks. I can appreciate that people have various backgrounds, political opinions, and belief systems. I'm well aware of the conservative culture here in Bartlesville, and I respect that. As a conservative community, I also understand the value of our citizens and this council place on the Constitution and the law. Our freedoms of speech and expression are foundational to our constitutional republic. These freedoms, however, are wide-ranging and can often come into conflict with our own personal beliefs. If everyone's beliefs were the same, we wouldn't need the protections the First Amendment provides. At the Pride event, organizers took great effort to work with our local law enforcement, not only to ensure a safe event for the attendees, but also to provide space for the protesters. The same protesters who were saying, well, I won't repeat what they said, but rest assured it wasn't kind. And yet space was made for them to exercise their constitutional right of free speech and expression. Did we agree with what they said? Of course not. But we agreed they had a right to be there, even if we didn't share their beliefs. We believe in their freedoms and rights, even when we disagree with their words and actions. Please also believe in ours. Council, thank you for your time and service to this amazing community.
Mary Lou Bork. Good evening.
My name is Mary Lou Bork, and I have lived in Bartlesville, my husband and I, for over 62 years. We love this community, and when we retired, we had an opportunity to move anywhere we could think of, but we chose to stay here because we love the community so much. I have always been so proud to be a Bartian. And yet when I witnessed the huge crowds that attended the Pride events, when I saw the Price Tower lighted with the colors of the rainbow, I was just moved beyond measure because for me, what that was a strong symbol that our community was about equality, we were about standing up for people's rights, and that we value every member of this community. You know, we have attended many shows, many Bartlesville theater, concerts, all types of things over the decades that we have been here. And I've seen many things. We were also at the Pride event in September. I watched the drag queen show. I can assure you there was no vulgarity. There was no near nudity. I saw no sexually provocative moves, and no more than I have seen anywhere in the community center or elsewhere. So I feel that we have a choice to make in this community. You know, are we going to hold one group of citizens to a different set of standards than we have? We apparently have a set of standards that people must follow in order to use the center. Or are we going to continue to protect our children by demonstrating tolerance, equality, and justice, and show everyone in this community and other communities that we value each and every member of the community? Thank you very much.
If I can read this, if I say this incorrectly, I apologize. Homer, is it Heppinston? Close. Okay, well, I apologize.
Vice Mayor Curd, honorable council members. Okay. I don't generally speak in front of public in this manner, but let me just lift up Bartlesville and compliment everybody who's here participating. I'm mindful of what we've come through all the way back to the Mayflower Compact when civil discourse was exchanged. You know, I did not live at that time. But considering that and the rules, statutes, and laws that are before us, beginning tonight, I was somewhat troubled, as the previous speaker explained. I would hope, sir, Mr. Stewart, that that remark that was presented about death and presence at the park is a matter of record, because I think it should be in the record if it was made to that severity. It troubles me that some people would give such utterance. The remarks I prepared are such that they're based primarily on experience. As I said earlier in the last meeting, I come from out of state. I've only been here a short time. But during my experience, I've been a court-mandated reporter, I've been a youth advocate, I've been a chaplain, in capacities that are very expressive of showing love for neighbor. But there's also a component of protection. Protecting what you have as far as decency and honor, even testimony, is something that is highly valued and to be praised and emulated when recognized in such neighbors. I did my study on statutes and code writing. I commend the lawyer for having the capacity to undertake such troublesome topics as we're looking at tonight. Oklahoma has some unique statutes, but at the core is certainly a degree of equality where we enjoy constitutional rights, the right and the pursuit of happiness. But let me just say, I intend to be here as well. And I will speak up, and I will have voice supporting Christian ethics. And Hebrews 17, where many pastors do not know homiletics from hermeneutics.
Thank you, sir. Next is Brian Ridinger. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, council members. My name is Brian Reininger, and I'm the evangelist pastor at Victory Worship Center, the church in the mall. I'm here on behalf of our head pastor, David Stroop III. When raising our concerns to the community center, the excuse that we received was the same as what was written in the Examiner Enterprise newspaper on November 2nd, is that the drag queen show does not engage in acts that go against the lewdness laws of the city, then they will not be discriminatory against, and I quote, race, creed, color, national origin, sex, age, physical handicap, or sexual orientation. And they left out religious, which begs the question if they would stand against anybody who has religious beliefs, because we have a belief system that does not include grooming children into engaging in the future sin that the Bible says that will keep people from inheriting the kingdom of heaven. That's 1 Corinthians 6:9-10. I was physically assaulted for carrying a sign that says Jesus is coming at the Pride event. Now, I was not associated with any of the protesters from before. I was a lone ranger in this. It was the police department that came to my rescue. The Bible is black and white on these subjects, whether or not certain leaders would admit this. Even outside of Christian viewpoint, this is classified as adult entertainment, meaning not child-friendly, despite advertised as family-friendly. As the prophet Isaiah said, "Woe to them who call evil good and good evil." A confirmation from my brother who prayed this morning. As spiritual leaders and as leaders in government in this community, we have an obligation to protect the most innocent and vulnerable against the evils that are disguised as love and acceptance, when these very evils want to introduce drag queen shows to children in the hopes of promoting the very immoral lives of its participants. All in the name of acceptance and non-discrimination. We as a city should be more concerned with the immoral things that we accept in it, as we call evil good and good evil. This is why I urge you to be more concerned with the obligation of upholding the moral law of the infinite, eternal, omnipotent God that is greater than all of our city laws, who we will all stand and account for someday. These decisions affect the future generations of this town, because it is Jesus Christ that separates us from the sinful curse passed down by previous generations. And we will reap according to that. In this city, we will be held accountable for protecting these children's innocence. Let that fall in the decisions of the individual parent, not us as a whole city. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next is Jim Henley. Good evening.
Jim Henley, 1700 Dewey, Bartlesville. Yeah, I'm going to mention again, Jesus said, if you cause one of these little ones to stumble, it's better if you had a millstone tied around your neck and you're thrown in the sea. I have a 2.5-year-old grandson that is so pure and innocent and trusting and loving. I can't imagine him hearing any of this stuff. I don't want him to ever hear it. These little ones are being groomed. Here's one right here that was mentored by a sex offender. There's been others I've got, 12-year-olds. What they're doing, they're taking them now. You didn't see the older ones here, but it's coming. Let me tell you. It's just like the old frog in the pot. It's just turning up the heat. When you condone what God condemns, you're in trouble. You're wrong. Also, this LBQT stuff, alphabet, whatever, I don't know, some people are putting a P over there now, pedophiles. Well, on YouTube.
No one's doing that.
On YouTube.
They're called conservatives.
On YouTube and some other entities, They now want these people called MAPs, minor attracted persons. They don't want them called pedophiles anymore. It goes back into just grooming and turning up the heat again. I'm sure they're working on something right now to bring this up to our libraries. They're doing it in most of the libraries in these different towns. I attended the event, and I thought it was gross. Just remember that the Bible says, these pastors, men shall not wear women's clothes, and women shall not wear men's clothes. That's what God himself said, because it's a perversion. And woe to those who call evil good and good evil, and light dark and dark light. You say, I've read the newspaper today, it sounds like they've already going to cave into this stuff. But I'll tell you, there used to be a law called outraging public decency. I don't know if we still got it, but if we don't, we need to bring it back. Because what I saw, that's exactly what it was. Much is given, much is required. You people have been given a lot of responsibility. So is the committee on this thing. You will be judged just like I will be judged. And woe to those that hurt these little ones in any ways. Also, God said, pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before the fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Check this microphone, be sure that the battery hasn't died on it. While he does that, I would remind you, to this point, everyone has been respected. Please allow people to speak, not interrupt, not add comments from the audience. I would appreciate it greatly. You good? Great. Next is Vic Holcomb. Good evening, sir.
Hey, Cassie. Sure. How's it going? So, good evening. I'm Vic Holcomb. I'm a past city councilor and a vice mayor. I speak tonight as a concerned citizen. Oh, they start clock. Sorry. Come on, Mike. Get on the ball. All right. Thank you. Again, recently we're talking about an LGBTQ event at Unity Square in which some of the community object. As a sponsor of the event, I'd like to give my stance. I believe that everyone in Bartlesville has the right to be their true, authentic selves. This includes having the ability to express themselves, even if that takes a forum you personally wouldn't attend. As a policy-making body, it is incumbent upon you, the council, to create a policy that is agnostic and enforced in a non-discriminatory manner. I'll remind the board that the Pride event was voluntarily attended by hundreds. As a parent and grandparent, there was nothing that I saw at the event that I would consider vulgar or age inappropriate. Actually, the event was just the opposite. It was open, inviting, and gave a positive message that everyone is included. The only offensive thing I witnessed was the language of the protesters. The vile words spewed from them were meant to offend. Luckily, the protesters were drowned out by the even louder message that love conquers hate. This board has a difficult proposition being asked of it. There are those here tonight that are exercising their constitutionally protected right to free speech, asking you as a governing body to infringe on those very same rights of others. Their point being that a drag show, by its very nature, is adult-oriented. I contend that isn't the case. Are there drag shows where children shouldn't attend? Of course. Just as there are movies, plays, and concerts that I wouldn't allow my children. That's my job as a parent to make that personal decision and not yours as a governing body to make on my behalf. What was at the Oklahomans for Equality event doesn't come close. I took no offense and saw nothing that would outrage. Someone said earlier about your oath of office. When you took your oath of office, you affirmed that you would support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Oklahoma. That very oath requires you to be unbiased and pass ordinances and policies that are applied equitably to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Devin Williams, father to two black children, black myself as you can tell, and a bisexual man who has been called a pedophile no less than 50 times at this meeting. I find it ironic that the community that bullied Drake Yancey to the point where he believed there was no other option but to take his own life would have the audacity to pantomime morality through an ordinance banning, of all things, drag shows. Under the cellophane guise of protecting children, where was his protection? I find it ironic that the Bartlesville City Council will consider passing legislation in the name of protecting children when queer youth are running away clear across the country because this community has made them feel so isolated and so unloved that they risk their life and limb to avoid suffering another moment here. Where is their protection? I find the hypocrisy appalling that the city that allowed Patrick Brown and others to be molested by a prominent doctor would dare feign concern for its children. Where is their protection? Every person in this community, both to the left and right, know exactly what this is. It is a litmus test to gauge the community's willingness to criminalize a person for their being. It's a Rorschach test for fascism. If this ordinance passes, mark my words, the end game is to lawfully fine, imprison, and even kill anyone who does not present as cisgendered and heterosexual. This community's acquiescence, y'all said that you would tie stones to people's necks, and you chuckle behind me. This community's acquiescence to politicians, like the majority of the city council, whom smile in your face and then spit on your rights, must stop. I don't possess the complexion or the demeanor to make any of these oppressors develop a moral compass. But perhaps I can convince those in hiding to come forward, to pledge to spend not a single dollar in any of their businesses or their families' businesses, to stop attending their fundraisers, and to stop accepting their funding. They hate us and we don't need them. Stop mistaking comfort for safety. Remember the recent history of this city. Bartlesville, Oklahoma was a sundown town. Bartlesville, Oklahoma was one of the last cities in Oklahoma to integrate. Bartlesville, Oklahoma has destroyed the life of well-meaning white people like Ruth Brown. This is not new. They've stolen the rights for us queer people. They've stripped away the bodily autonomy for women and virgin people. And they've always had it out for black people. They'll come for you eventually. They'll come for you.
I struggle occasionally to read handwriting, so forgive me, but David, is it Grisham?
Yes, sir.
Good evening.
My name is Pastor David Grisham, and I'm the director of God and Country Ministries, and I was one of the 3 protesters or preachers that was at the Bartlesville Gay Pride, along with my brother in Christ back here, RichPenkoski. And I'm here today to give you expert testimony of my 15+ years of street preaching as to where this stuff is going. I want to tell you the future of Bartlesville if you don't get a handle on this right now. And the future in Bartlesville is going to look a lot like New Orleans. In New Orleans, I preached that decadence down there at the French Quarter this year and last year. And let me tell you what's going to happen in your city if you continue to allow this here. I've got pictures on my phone right now. It would be indecent to show them in front of this public, in front of these people here. It would be indecent. Total nudity going on down there. We're talking men running around, old and young, with nothing but aprons covering their naked genitals and their whole backside exposed, with children on the parade route. Women, I've got a video on my phone of 2 women simulating a vulgar sex act, an oral sex act in front of children on the parade route. I have pictures on my phone of women walking around topless in front of children. What's going to happen in the future, regardless of what they say is going on now, I'm telling you, it wasn't always like that in New Orleans. It started off like Bartlesville. And it is going to get worse. There was a young lady that was up here a minute ago, and she told you about the Stonewall riots. She told you about how the gay community got started, the gay pride events got started in Stonewall. What she didn't tell you was the whole history of that. Do you know why the police went in there? Number one, they were selling illegal liquor to minors. And why were there minors inside? Because they were watching drag shows and they were being sexually exploited by the LGBT community at that time. That's why the police went in there and raided that place, was to save the minors and stop the illicit, illegal liquor trade that was going on inside. That is the truth. That's part of the real history of Stonewall. You don't want that here. I'm telling you, you think that a lot of people thought, well, gay marriage is going to be the end of it. All they want is gay marriage. No, that was a stepping stone. If you think this was bad at your park this year, if you think it was bad at that restaurant the other night that we got video of that a lot of people have seen, we're the ones that released that video. If you think that was bad, you just wait. It's going to get a lot worse. It's going to get a lot worse. We don't want that to happen. Now, another man got up here and talked about how your responsibility to the Constitution, you also have a responsibility to God. As another man got up and said, we're all going to be judged. Let's be judged righteously.
Thank you.
God bless you all.
Again, I know passion and concern is high, but if this is the second warning, if this happens a third time, I will ask people to be escorted out. Please allow other people to speak as you were allowed to speak. Next is RichPenkoski.
I also happen to be one of the preachers that was at that event. Now, it's been stated by numerous Christians and conservatives that the LGBT are coming for your children. I disagree. They're not coming for your kids. They're already here. And I'm here today to talk about the drag queens that at your Pride event in September. Last month, at your meeting, this group of reprobates stood up here and bold-faced lied, and they are still lying, telling you nothing inappropriate happened at their Pride event. We have video, and I know every single one of you saw that video because I sent it to you, of drag queens squatting down in front of a child's face and shaking his rear end in said child's face. Drag queens stripping on stage, and no, they didn't get naked, but they did remove clothing and accept dollar bills from children, turning that public park into a strip club. The head of this LGBT activist group here stood here and said she agreed that adult entertainment has no place in public venues and should be off limits to children. And I cannot agree more. These activists claim that their events are family friendly. But what you don't realize is when they say family friendly, they're not talking about families the way you and I would. Family friendly to them is a form of code. Drag Queen Story Hour is family friendly in the sense of family as an old school queer code to identify and connect with other queers on the street. That is the goal. Not to reinforce the biological family, but to facilitate the child's transition into the ideological family. You have to understand how they define family to understand what they mean by family friendly. Can you tell me what other event that you've gone to that features 11-year-old girls screaming at grown men about the size of their genitals while these perverts clap and cheer? Tell me where else that happens. It was so disturbing that even your news reporter said they didn't even know how to handle it. All they could do was smile. Where do children learn this stuff? They learn it at Pride events. They learn it from drag queens. The fact that that little girl stood there and talked and screamed at male genitalia and its size is proof that they are grooming your kids. How about the video from Crossing 2nd from the other night, where a drag queen put his head in people's laps while teenagers held up dollar bills to give to the drag queen, while the drag queen stood there and spread his legs in front of two giggling little girls. And I know you all saw that video as well. We have allowed deviants and perverts access to our children, and it's like Satan took 1 Corinthians 6, 9, and 10 and used it as a blueprint for modern day America. The LGBT can say whatever they want and cry homophobia, and people buy it hook, line, and sinker. I've talked to Liberty Council, and if you pass an ordinance, they will consider defending the city for free.
Right here. I apologize. No. Just want to be sure we. Thank you. Thank you. The microphone will pick you up, so
yeah,
you speak into it. Very good.
How's this? Good?
Excellent.
I think that'll work. Okay. My name again is Bill Payton, City Commissioner, Emeritus, Ward 3, elected April 2nd, 1985, Bartlesville, Oklahoma. I'm a 27-year veteran, CID Special Agent, Criminal Investigator of the United States Army, retired. I'm currently CLEAT certified law enforcement, state of Oklahoma, 20 years. I'm speaking from the perspective of criminal investigation and also the law. Title 21, Section 1021 of Oklahoma statute forbids and penalizes indecent exposure, which it defines as intentional and lewd exhibition of one's private body parts, including genitals, in public or in the presence of anyone who would be offended or annoyed by such a display. This includes exposing bare buttocks, which videos and photos clearly show, and we the public are not only offended, but we're outraged about the camera and sexually suggested gyrations, provocations, strutting, mocking, stripping that go on in front of our children and give performers cash like adults do in strip shows. This is intentional, lewd, indecent exposure, and every detail is a violation of the Oklahoma Indecent Exposure Statute, which supersedes anything any city ordinance has on record. Anyone convicted of a third offense, indecent exposure, is guilty of a felony which carries 30 days up to 10 years in prison, up to $20,000 in fines, and sex offender registration for 15 years. It's a misdemeanor violation of Oklahoma Public Indecency Statute for any act that grossly disturbs the public peace or health of a community, which was spoken about here earlier, or openly outrage the public, which has been spoken about here, and decency in the injurious of the public morals, including the presence of children by advertising in schools, like the posters that were posted for this event, family-friendly event, which it was not. Known to this kind of exposure, the known exposure of this damages the brains of our adolescents and our children. The abuse of this has to stop. The fact that it was given as a family-friendly event under the permit that you issued proves that we need to work harder as a city to promote the community from abusing and tearing down what we stand for. Your promotion of public ludicrous under this guise that tolerated will ruin our economy. People will not want to move here, and they won't certainly want to raise their children here. So we need to step in and do something about it. The city council needs to step up and inform the community and the state that they're going to abide by the law that's already set down and that's in force. Thank you very much.
Two people, McCormick, but I believe they're in the other room. I should have asked them to head this way. They can hear me. I think there's a slight delay or overflow. Yeah, or overflow. Yeah, you could. Both Jonathan and Judy McCormick. Thank you, Elaine. First I had listed was Jonathan McCormick. I'm sorry, I should have given you a heads up so that you could head this way. My fault.
It's okay. So, hello, I'm Jonathan McCormick Jr. I've been your neighbor for 6 years, and I stand with the pro-free speech speakers before me. I'm a libertarian. You live your life, I'll live mine. Despite hearing many indignant folks here today, I see no legitimate justification for the censorship of alternative lifestyle choices as expressed last September. Don't like LGBT culture? Then don't go to LGBT events. Don't think LGBT stuff is for kids? Then keep your kids away from them. Let you be the protective parent. Don't delegate that role to the government. And don't try to have the government take that role away from other parents who see the world through a slightly different lens than you do. I'd also like to point out, as some of the other speakers have, that Election Day is tomorrow, so please vote, everybody. I'd also like to bring up something which I think is a possible improvement upon the current voting system that we have. Because when you have 3 or more people running for a single office in an election, then a voter might support the candidate that they think is going to be least popular, and that puts them in a dilemma. You know, do they vote for the person who they really prefer, or do they vote for some person who's not their least favorite? And so I think that ranked choice voting, which is also known as instant runoff voting, I think it's a very good tool for overcoming that challenge so that voters can truly express their honest opinions at the ballot box. And I think that's critical for having a thriving, functional, democratic republic system. And so the League of Women Voters in Oklahoma did some research on this back in 2012. And they found that there's basically nothing in current law that prohibits the use of this voting method, but it would be helpful to have laws in place to actually start including this voting method as an option. And so after looking at plurality voting, 2-round runoffs, and instant runoff voting, local leagues agreed that this should be used in Oklahoma for basically all of the elections that we do, including the city officials and school boards. So that's their opinion. And according to fairvote.org, 2 states, 1 county, and 53 cities within the US already use this method. So my request to the council or staff is to, at some point, either tonight or maybe we can arrange for some other time, to please educate me on the proper procedures that I should follow in order to initiate a serious inquiry and decision by the city on whether or not to pursue and use the instant runoff voting system for Bartlesville elections. Thank you.
Thank you. We need to pull it. There we go. Okay. Thank you.
I too am just a private person, but the issue was important enough that I feel that, even though it's uncomfortable, I'll come and speak with you all. And thank you for listening to us. I have libertarian leanings also. I think that the smaller government, the better. And we've got to be careful because although we have a meta-narrative wanting a wholesome, healthy environment for our children to grow up in, sometimes that ideal is just not met. And with government owning things, we have to give equal time to bad and harmful ideas, as well as good and wholesome ones. And the only way to stop that is to have privatize as much as possible. Even parks, we have so many benefactors in this community, like Phillips, Conoco, ABB, so many others. But there could be no shortage of parks. And I'm wondering what the possibility is of that occurring. People of goodwill banding together to make this available so that we won't have to feel victim to this with our kids. With this subject in mind, I have done a little bit of back research, okay, on people with sexual dysphoria and / confusion. And I found in my research that a lot of times it's formed from a background of rape, molestation, sexual, physical, domestic violence, that sort of thing, that births this condition. The stats are also highlighted that I have found that they in turn do some of that hurting and damaging of others. Unless you go to a place in your mind where you can stop that cycle. Anyway, hence the saying, hurt people, and that is a truism. okay? We are called to have compassion, forgive them, help them, but certainly not to celebrate with them or be an active participant in perpetuating the problem of their dysphoria. I mean, it's a problem, and it just makes the confusion worse. And instead of a celebration of sexual dysphoria, it only creates more sexual dysphoria in the children whose frontal lobes have not even been fully developed. They're still determining what's right and wrong. We need to be the guardians of those who cannot protect themselves, especially the youngest and most vulnerable of our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes everyone that signed up for Citizens to be Heard. Again, I would like to thank you for being attentive. I know that not everything that was said, I try to listen and pay attention closely. And it was pretty well balanced between the two. So certainly, perhaps you didn't agree with half of what was said on those issues. I personally agreed with the part about the adult city council meetings. So remember that. But it is good to be in a city where people feel their desire and their passion and they want to share that. And I do appreciate it. I think everyone on this council does too. And they can do that respectfully. Because of the interest in this particular issue, we did adjust. If you've been to council meetings before, you will notice that there is an adjustment here. We've moved up to item number 5, the consideration and discussion of a report by the city attorney regarding municipal regulation of adult entertainment in the Bartlesville Pride event hosted by Oklahomans for Equality on September the 10th, 2022 at Tower Center at Unity Square, presented by our city attorney, Mr. Jess King. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I was sitting there surveying the crowd and contemplating the size of the task that you all have put before me, and our city manager leaned over with a bag of candy in his hand and said, "Would you like a Mike and Ike?" And so I wrote the attention for me, so I appreciate him for that. This is quite a task. I thought that it's appropriate, given the size of the task, to provide everyone with a reminder of what exactly it is I do. I feel like there's been a little bit of confusion. I took the oath that was described by several speakers, but that oath obligates me to perform the duty that's provided under the amended charter of the city of Bartlesville, Article 5, Section 7. The city attorney shall be the chief legal advisor to the council, all officers, departments, and agencies, and all officers and employees in matters relating to their official powers and duties. I was not elected. Nobody in this room voted for me. I served at the pleasure of the city council. Because I was not elected, I'm assuming that nobody cares what my opinion is. The city attorney does not make public policy decisions, and I do not advise the city based on my own opinion of what public policy should be. I take those duties very seriously. I would also say, CYA, your city attorney is not a First Amendment expert. And my constitutional law professor, RichPenkoski, whose class I was in 2005, will probably say that I'm not a constitutional law expert. If you would ask my partner, David King, lovingly refers to me as the office cow lawyer. I don't think he knows if I represent the cows or the people that own the cows. But if you would ask me a question about livestock for Flevin or gas leases, business contracts, I feel like I could stand up here with a great deal of authority. The First Amendment is not my area. I hope everyone will give me a little grace on that front. Finally, I want to say that I was not a witness to the events at Unity Square. I was not there. So anything that I say in my report is based on my investigation, not a first-hand account, and would carry very little weight forward. This is the issue. Local resident Shannon King was concerned with what she saw at the Pride event. No reason for me to describe all that. We've spent over an hour discussing that already. but based on her concern, this petition was published on change.org and received, at least at the time that I put this presentation together, nearly 2,300 signatures. Ms. King came to the October 3rd City Council meeting, and she asked you this. I asked you to determine if this activity violated any state laws, city ordinances, or city contracts for use in public areas, and if so, take appropriate action. If no laws or ordinances were broken and no current contracts violated, then I ask you to study this issue and consider new city ordinances to prohibit adult-oriented activity from happening in public areas again. I took that statement as a statement of the issue to present to you today. So I've broken that down into 3 areas. First is what sexual activity is prohibited by state and local statutes and ordinances. Second, what contractual standards are applicable to adult-oriented programming in Unity Square. And finally, what actions can and cannot be taken by the City Council to prohibit adult-oriented entertainment in public spaces. This is going to be pretty exciting. I hope everybody's coming. First, what sexual activity is prohibited by state statutes and local ordinances? I broke this into 3 areas for consideration. First is municipal criminal ordinances. Second is state criminal statutes. And finally, we have municipal licensing requirements. This is really easy to read, folks. I apologize. Our municipal code has a couple areas. I can't even read that very well, so I'm going to cheat here. The first municipal code, section 12-64, prohibits indecent exposure. And that prohibition is interesting in that it provides a definition of lewd, which is licentious, lecherous, dissolute, debauched, impure, salacious, or pornographic. That section provides that every person who willfully, either lewdly exposes his person or private parts thereof in any public place, or any place where there are present other persons to be offended or annoyed thereby, or procures, counsels, or assists any person to lewdly expose himself to public view, or to the view of any number of persons, such as is offensive to decency, or is adapted to excite vicious or lewd thoughts or acts, shall be guilty of an offense against the city of Bartlesville, Oklahoma. The municipal code goes on to prohibit lewd conduct. Again, lewd was previously defined. Every person who conducts himself in a lewd manner or in a manner suggestive of lewdness shall be guilty of an offense against the city of Bartlesville. Finally, we have a municipal ordinance for disturbance of the peace under section 12-94. It is unlawful for any person to willfully or maliciously disturb, either by day or night, the peace and quiet of the city, family, or person by obscene or profane language, whether addressed to the party so disturbed or to some other person. I would also note that the Bartlesville Municipal Code adopts all misdemeanor offenses that are described by Oklahoma statutes. A couple notes on the jurisdiction of the city of Bartlesville. Bartlesville Municipal Court is a court not of record, and we do not provide jury trials. That limits us by statute to a maximum jurisdictional amount of $500. So any of the things that I have just described to you would come with a maximum fine of $500. State criminal statutes. There are a number, and they have been discussed by some of the speakers already here today. The first is Title 21, Section 22. This is often referred to as outraging public decency. Every person who willfully and wrongfully commits any act which grossly injures the person or property of another, or which grossly disturbs the public peace or health, or which openly outrages the public decency, including but not limited to urination in a public place, is injurious to public morals, although no punishment is expressly prescribed thereof by this code, guilty of misdemeanor. Moving on to Title 21, Section 1021A. This is a prohibition against indecent exposure. Every person who willfully and knowingly either lewdly exposes his or her person or genitals in a public place, procures, counsels, or assists any person to expose such person, or to make any other exhibition of such person to public view, or to the view of any number of persons, for the purpose of sexual simulation of the viewer, shall be guilty upon conviction of a felony. And I'm reciting these in pertinent part counsel. Some of these are quite long, and so I cut this down to the part that I thought might be pertinent to this speech. Finally, we have Title 21, Section 1122, which prohibits lewd acts with minors. It is a felony for any person to knowingly and intentionally, in a lewd and lascivious manner, for the purpose of sexual gratification, cause, expose, force, or require a child to look upon the body or private parts of another person, force or require any child under 16 years of age or other individual the person believes to be a child under 16 years of age to view any obscene materials in child pornography or materials deemed harmful to minors. And such terms are defined by sections 1024.1 and 1040.75 of this title. Also prohibited are to cause, expose, force, or require a child to look upon sexual acts performed in the presence of a child, or finally, force or require a child to touch or feel the body or private parts of the child or of another person. Going back to the subsections referring to sections 1024.1, that is a prohibition on child porn, and section 1040.75. That is a defined term called materials harmful to a minor. And I found it extremely interesting that if you go to section 1040.75 in the Oklahoma Criminal Code, you will find that actions harmful to minors is defined by standards that were outlined by the Supreme Court in the case of Miller v. California, which has already been discussed here today, and which we will talk about more in a second. So there's a lot of this is coming down to the Miller case. Next, we have municipal licensing requirements. And I'm not familiar with drag shows. Watched some drag shows in a room with Chief Mike Bailey, and learned a lot. One of the things that struck me that I know there were complaints from lots of people about tipping, and I didn't realize that tipping is pervasive in these events. Tipping is happening the whole time. Every single one of the performers was tipped and tipped and tipped again. So it got me to wondering if we have a business licensing requirement that needed to be considered. The first is sexually oriented businesses is defined under our code. And sexually oriented businesses are any business where live performances or recorded media in any form for any consideration to patrons for use in viewing of specified sexual activity. Specified sexual activity is also defined. Specified sexual activity is the fondling or other erotic touching of human genitals, pubic area, buttocks, anus, vulva, or breasts. Sex acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated, including but not limited to intercourse, oral copulation, masturbation, or anal copulation. My mother would be so happy that I'm saying excretory functions as part of or in connection with any of the activities set forth in subsection 18A or B of this section. And finally, physical violence, bondage, mutilation, rape, actual or simulated, as part of or related to any other activity set forth in these subsections. Again, that is the definition of specified sexual activity, which would make a business a sexually oriented business. It's currently defined, it doesn't appear to me that drag performances at Unity Square would qualify as sexually oriented businesses under the Bartlesville Municipal Code. Thus, even though it is apparent the drag queens were performing for monetary gain, their performances were not specified sexual activity, so they were not engaged in a sexually oriented business as defined by our code. I also was curious to see whether we had a temporary business licensure issue. Bartlesville Municipal Code. Based on my research, none of these performers were from Bartlesville, so that is an element in determining whether or not these were temporary businesses in our park. Bartlesville Municipal Code 5-181 outlines the requirements for licensing of temporary businesses. Specifically excluded from Bartlesville's temporary business licensing requirements are activities involving this expression of First Amendment speech. And that's the tough part of this presentation that we still have to get to. There is no discussion in this presentation about zoning. And that is because this occurred in a public park. And obviously, we're not here to zone or rezone our public parks. There is quite a lot of interesting wording in some of our zoning statutes. I had to look up the word turn, but it's in there. But since we're talking about activity in a public park, I did not think that zoning was applicable to this discussion. Contractual standards is the next issue Mrs. King wanted us to delve into. What contractual standards are applicable to the adult-oriented programming at Unity Square? Council, I've provided you all prior to this meeting a memorandum that perhaps more thoroughly explains my research than my halting delivery here today. But that memorandum includes a number of exhibits that you can refer to in the course of my presentation here. And the first one is Exhibit 1. That is a memorandum of understanding between the city and the Bartlesville Community Center Trust Authority, BCCTA. This was the original memorandum that was entered into when you began contemplating what to do with this park that you were planning to do. Next is a lease and operating agreement between the city and the Bartlesville Community Center Trust Authority from April 1st of 2019. That is Exhibit 2 in your packet. I want to make sure that everybody that is here listening today knows that the decision on programming at Unity Square are not made by the city. You did not vote on whether or not to allow any specific programs. You did not vote yes or no on whether this program would go on. That decision was made by the Bartlesville Community Center Trust Authority pursuant to this lease and operating agreement. That lease and operating agreement between the Community Center Trust Authority and trust authorities, that's another exciting topic. A trust authority is a governmental entity, and it is separate and apart from the city of Bartlesville. The city of Bartlesville is the beneficiary of the trust authority, but is not in charge of the trust authority. That is an independent entity. So that lease and operating agreement between the city and the Bartlesville Community Center Trust Authority has in it a no discrimination clause. That no discrimination clause reads, the BCC shall not exclude any individual, group, or organization from participation in, deny the benefits of, or otherwise tolerate unlawful discrimination on the basis of race, creed, color, national origin, sex, age, physical handicap, or sexual orientation, and the use of Tower Center, and any contracts relating to Tower Center, and any programs carried out on the premises of Tower Center, and the employment of any individuals who may provide services or work at Tower Center, or in the selection of vendors, suppliers, service providers, students, teachers, sponsors, or others, and matters relating to the use or operation of Tower Center. So there's a specific requirement that would prevent discrimination by the Bartlesville Community Center Trust Authority in use of that facility. Next exhibit to bring to your attention would be Exhibit 3 to your memorandum. Now, this was the green space and rental agreement dated January 18, 2022 between the Bartlesville Community Center Trust Authority and Oklahomans for Equality. I guess I messed that up on my PowerPoint. Computers aren't my thing. So I'm pretty proud of myself for putting this together, and I hope everyone realized I had to stretch. The green space and rental agreement that both the BCCTA and OKEQ signed provides this. By signing this agreement, I acknowledge the compliance requirements of Bartlesville Community Center practices and procedures information and rental fee schedule, and agree to adhere to all guidelines, rules, practices, and procedures as stated therein, as well as all local, state, and federal laws. Failure on the part of the lessee, that would be OKEQ, to comply with the terms of this agreement may result in the immediate cancellation and may influence decisions regarding future use of the BCC. I acknowledge that my requirements for equipment, services, rental times may change prior to the event. That's not really relevant. The important part here is the failure on the part of OKEQ to comply with the terms of this agreement may result in immediate cancellation and may influence decisions regarding future use of the BCC. By reference, the green space and rental agreement, which is in your memorandum as Exhibit 3, includes this document, the Bartlesville Community Center Practices and Procedures Information. And based on my investigation, I can confirm that this document was presented to OKEQ. This document provides as follows. Performance content. As this is a public space and open to citizens of all ages, the lessee is responsible to ensure that movies, videos, music, and productions at Unity Square are appropriate for the audience attending the event as set out in the Motion Picture Association of America, MPAA, film rating system, and local community standards. Lessee must also notify the box office if any event will have content which may not be appropriate for certain age groups, as patrons must be advised at the box office at the time of ticket purchases. This document also provides as to conduct, that the lessee is responsible for the conduct of all event guests, vendors, representative performers, volunteers, and participants during the signed contract time at Unity Square. So presumably this would mean that OKEQ agrees it is responsible for the conduct of its performance. Based on my investigation, it does not appear that OKEQ approached the Bartlesville Community Center Trust Authority to notify it that there was any inappropriate content. Next, this is the meat of the discussion, and I hope I am up to describing to you the state of what must be the most complicated part of American jurisprudence. You might as well have asked me to describe to you the basics of quantum mechanics. This is an area that the Supreme Court has struggled with for many, many years, but I will do my best, so bear with me. The question here is what actions can and cannot be taken by the City Council to prohibit adult-oriented entertainment in public spaces. Your authority as a municipality is based on inherent police powers. Municipalities have inherent authority to regulate health, welfare, and morality in pursuit of common good and public welfare. The police power stems from British common law and is protected by the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which provides that the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively and to the people. Of course, that power is limited by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which binds both the power of the federal government, states, and of course our municipality. It says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, petition the government for redress of grievances. So this portion of my presentation is primarily a discussion of what you can do within the limits imposed upon you by the First Amendment. I will note, however, as I've already discussed, that Bartlesville has already exercised its inherent police powers to regulate sexually oriented businesses within the corporate limits of the city of Bartlesville through zoning. But again, I don't believe that this dispute has any bearing on zoning. First task in any First Amendment analysis is a forum analysis. This forum analysis was announced by the court in Cornelius versus NAACP. That's another exciting dispute in which the Eisenhower administration put together a program allowing federal employees to contribute to a fund that would benefit local charitable organizations. In the Reagan administration, President Reagan thought it was advisable to limit the eligible groups to non-political organizations, non-lobbying outfits. The NAACP sued and lost. The Supreme Court ruled that this limitation, saying that the only charities that federal employees could use this program to donate to must be non-political. And so in doing so, the court set forth this analysis, which I won't read to you because it's kind of boring. But the bottom line is that public parks are quintessential First Amendment areas, and it is the forum that is most protected by the First Amendment. And our analysis needs to go no farther than that, because we're talking about Unity Square, which is a public park, and so we're talking about the most protected area that we have in our city. This that we're in here today is a limited public forum. That is, this is a forum that is created by you to conduct business. And so you, at your discretion, can set rules. We saw them here. Mr. Bailey can't run a timer, but one of those rules is 3 minutes. You are allowed, as a city council, to put that kind of restriction on expressive activity in this limited public forum. Your rights to make rules in a public forum, quintessential public forum, like Unity Square, are much more prescribed. You might have run, if you've looked into this at all, you might have run into discussions of reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. The seminal case on that is Ward versus Rock against racism. In that case, New York City officials adopted regulations to control noise amplification at an amphitheater in Central Park. I guess they were really rocking against racism, and it was loud and people complained. Rock Against Racism argued that the regulation was an impermissible restriction on their freedom of speech, and they lost. The Supreme Court ruled that the regulation on how they could have their music was content neutral and thus permissible. Time, place, manner restriction. The three-pronged test outlined in Ward versus Rock Against Racism was the regulation must be content neutral, must be narrowly tailored to serve significant government interest, and it must leave open ample alternative channels for communicating the speaker's message. So I think that's a test that you should keep in mind when discussing speech in a public forum. Here's the fun part, the exception. And there's exceptions to everything in American law. This was described in Interstate Circuit versus Dallas by Justice Harlan as the intractable obscenity problem. I didn't come up with that, I can't even spell intractable. Justice Potter Stewart most famously ruled on this area of the law, saying that he could not define obscenity, but he knew it when he saw it. And that right there is the problem that the court has struggled with in defining your authority over regulating obscenity. The court finally was able to come up with a test that has already been discussed here today, and that case was in Miller v. California, 1971 case in which Marvin Miller, a publisher in California known as the King of Smut, was convicted by the state of California for distribution of obscene materials. The Supreme Court upheld his conviction by establishing this test. In order for material to be considered obscene, it must pass all three of these tests. Those are whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient's interest. Second, whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law. And finally, whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So that's the test that is still the test today. Interestingly, obscenity must be erotic. In Cohen versus California, the Supreme Court considered the conviction of a man for wearing a jacket that said F the draft, but he used all 4 letters. And it was determined in that case that whatever else may be necessary to give rise to a state's broader power to prohibit obscene expression, such expression must be in some significant way erotic. It cannot plausibly be maintained that this vulgar allusion to the selective service system would conjure up such psychic simulation if in anyone likely to be confronted with Cohen's crudely defaced jacket. So his jacket saying F the draft was not erotic and therefore not obscene. Interestingly, and this is just a side note, this case operated to protect the speech of a local resident just last month. The mayor received a number of complaints about an F Joe Biden flag. Those complaints came into the city, and based on this case, it was determined that that gentleman had the right to have his flag given some protest. So this brings us to community standards. There's been a lot of discussion about what are community standards. We go back to this Miller test that we've already discussed. That test is this. Does the speech appeal to the prurient interest? Does the speech depict or describe in a patently offensive way sexual conduct defined by applicable state law? Finally, does the speech lack serious literary, artistic, political, and scientific value? The question of community standards applies to the first of those 2 inquiries. And the Supreme Court had some interesting discussion in the Miller case about how to apply community standards in a given case. I'll read those because I think it's important. It is neither realistic nor constitutionally sound to read the First Amendment as requiring that people of Maine or Mississippi accept public depiction of conduct found tolerable in Las Vegas or New York City. People in different states vary in their tastes and attitudes, and their diversity is not to be strangled by the absolutism of imposed uniformity. The court went on to rule that the primary concern with requiring a jury to apply the standard of the average person applying contemporary community standards is to be certain that, so far as material is not aimed at a deviant group, it will be judged by its impact on an average person, rather than a particularly susceptible person, sensitive person, or indeed a totally insensitive person. So, since there has been so much discussion about community standards is not a document. There is no document within the possession of the city of Bartlesville that has a title community standards. It doesn't exist. What we do have is a lot of different contracts with labor unions, rules for use of public parks, documents that describe conduct that we find acceptable or unacceptable for our public employees or for use of parks, etc. None of them have a label on them that says this is a community standard. That's not how this works. You'll notice that in that second quotation there from the Miller case that we are talking about a standard to be applied by a jury, a finder of fact in a lawsuit. So when a municipality is sued for implementation of an ordinance that is challenged, or when a defense attorney defends his client that has been charged with a crime under an ordinance like this, the defense attorney, the attorneys will present evidence to the jury on what they think the community standards in that particular community might be, and the jury makes the decision. It's not a document that you're going to find in the city of Bartlesville. Probably the most interesting and famous of these is the case of Larry Peterman and the Provo Marriott. Provo, Utah charged, or I should say Utah County, Utah, charged Mr. Larry Peterman back in 1999 with 15 counts of obscenity. for distributing obscene materials from his porn shop in Provo, Utah. And having a clever defense attorney, Mr. Peterman had hired somebody with thinking a little bit outside the box, and that attorney subpoenaed the records of the Marriott that was across the parking lot from this porn shop, and found that the use of pay-per-view pornography in that Marriott in Provo, Utah was not only very high, it was among the highest in the whole Marriott system. This was before internet porn. This was 1999, and it was determined that people came to that shopping center and stayed in that Marriott and consumed a whole lot of pornography. And the jury found that that was the community standard in Provo, Utah, and this man quit. So, a discussion of what community standards are is a difficult one. I can't tell you what they are. I can tell you that creative lawyers would have a fun time making that case. And this is my conclusion, and I know you guys are loving to hear me read, but I'm going to read this so that there's no mistake. The City of Bartlesville may, under its inherent police power, enact reasonable restrictions upon adult entertainment, so long as those restrictions are content neutral, narrowly tailored to serve significant government interest, and leave open ample alternative channels for alternative communication. City ordinances and state statutes regulating this area are already on the books. The city may also restrict adult entertainment which is deemed obscene. Those restrictions and any new restrictions enacted by the Bartlesville City Council will be evaluated using the Miller test based on prevailing community standards in Bartlesville as determined by a judge or jury based on the evidence presented to them at trial. I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege and talk about a few things. First is I noticed a general agreement among most of the speakers here that Bartlesville is a pretty great place. And I've also had the opportunity to live other places. Could have gone and done a lot of other things. I decided to come here because I like it here. And I like my job. And I enjoy the challenge that you all present me. This one was a little much. I appreciate it if we could ease off for a little while. But I'm glad to hear so much agreement that Bartlesville is a special place. Finally, I'd like to give credit to Middle Tennessee State University Free Speech Center. What an awesome website that is. Any of you that have researched this need to go to mtsu.edu and look at this. And I have a special place in my heart for MTSU because I went to the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, and was a rugby player. And our rival team was MTSU. And we went there and played rugby against them more times than I can remember. And I can assure you that no place in the world is free speech more actively used than on a rugby pitch. So it seems appropriate. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Kane, for very thorough treatment that quickly exceeded my knowledge. So I've learned a lot tonight. Council, having heard this discussion up to this point, what are your questions for Mr. Kane?
Mr. Kane, I know that this was, I'm going to ask you to switch gears for a second, and instead of thinking of the Unity Squares Park, think about the sidewalks around there. Would all of that kind of fall under these same standards?
Yes. Sidewalks, streets, any of that's going to be considered to be a quintessential public forum.
Okay, so with the obscenity, standards that could be used to restrict the First Amendment, would someone, for instance, using a megaphone to reach something more appropriate that would be in a penthouse forum and shouting out at a bounce house, would that be something that might fall under this time, place, location, obscenity laws?
All I can tell you, Mr. Stewart, is I wasn't there, and based on my knowledge, no citations were issued.
Good try. Shot down in flames. Good try.
Anyone else?
I'll ask more. So going with the Miller test, that we were looking at there, like that slide.
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't.
I put it in there twice.
Yeah,
it's
there,
kind of
okay.
important.
So on this, so based on kind of the comments we've heard from the people in the community tonight that, you know, that were you know, wanting to restrict things at Unity Square, I got the impression that generally they thought that Pride and the LGBTQ IA plus group, they had some political agenda. So if we took it as that, would it fail in that test of us doing any kind of restriction that you know, there did have some kind of political value of them being there?
Well, so I'm going to punt on you because this determination is made by a jury, and I'm a lawyer.
I can't catch you on
Yeah, no, I'm a lawyer, not a juror. I'm not even allowed to serve on juries. So I can't tell you, but what that says is serious political value.
Okay.
And a jury could determine in its discretion that what was happening at Unity Square that day had serious political value or didn't have serious political value, and the jury would make that determination.
Nice try. I hope you guys watching this are learning.
Few minutes. Well, we have received a lot of information. I've used the example that my sponge only holds so much, and my sponge is approaching capacity. There is a tremendous amount of information here. I would say that I believe this council, I think I can speak for them, wants to do whatever we do, for whatever reason we do it correctly. We want to do that the first time. I would prefer to get things right. It's called being deliberative, and I think that being deliberate in deliberations is something that has proven time and again to be worthwhile. Mr. Kane, it comes to my mind, I'm just floating ideas, counsel. I made notes here as we were listening to this. It is not, to my knowledge, an issue that this, what amounts to a complaint, was in fact taken to the Bartlesville Community Center, who oversees that facility, which is one of the responsibilities spelled out in their contractual agreements. Along with that, these sorts of events, any sort of event, could happen at any of our parks using the same issues that Mr. Kane has so ably laid out. And I'm not aware that our Parks Department, our Parks Board, Mr. Kurt could correct me if I'm wrong, has addressed this issue. Is there value in involving these groups that we use for many things to help us be deliberate as we consider all of the various pieces of information? I don't know, that's just a thought.
I don't know if it hurt, but I just think based on the comments that we got tonight from you know, people wanting to do more restrictions and the discussion of, you know, constitutional duties and oaths and things like that, I think that shows that this has serious political value, and that at some point it's going to come back that there's really no more restrictions that we can put in place.
Well, I would agree with you. It's going to come back to this council. My question is there value in expanding the discussion to see what a broader section of responsible groups believe? We've heard that the Community Center Trust Authority and the subset, the Power Center Unity Square Management Group, really have oversight of that area. So this council did not approve, nor did this city approve, as Mr. Kane has stated, any permit or agreement use or purpose. And yet we have, it seems to me, leapfrogged the very group that manages that facility. So I bring that up. Again, being deliberate. I suspect that whatever happens is not going to make everyone happy, and I've accepted that. But I think that what we do needs to be correct and proper under the law. I fully concur. We take an oath to uphold the Constitution. We are a nation and a people of laws. I don't always like those laws. We change those laws when we need to. We cannot ignore those laws. We can. Mr. King would tell me we do so at our peril, I suspect. And that is the reason that I want to be very deliberate.
I agree. I think getting the drink out of the fire hose the last couple of weeks, and Mr. King's report gives us a great deal to study and consider. The involvement of other groups that oversee our parks and oversee Tower Center, I think would be vital to have their input and to be able to review some of the things. I sat on the committee for the Tower Center and Zelle that we're at. It was a blueprint of other operating agreements we have in the city. So it's not anything invented particularly for just that park, but it follows a lot of our other procedures that we have in place, a lot of the community standards that Mr. King mentioned tonight, flow through the document like that. So I think we've got to take our time. I don't know what the rush would be to rush to judgment immediately and put forth recommendations or not recommendations before we have some more time to deliberate over the information that we've given.
You mentioned, or I read, I'm like Mr. Kurt, I've been through a tremendous amount of material in the last weeks. The MPAA standards, I cannot tell you specifically what those are. I'm familiar with the concept. The contract the community center has with user groups calls out those standards as the comparison mark, the benchmark, if you will. I'm not familiar with those. I think we need to look at that and see if that is an appropriate standard. What is that standard? So I think there's a lot more questions that have to be answered. And I know people are frustrated. It doesn't matter, across the spectrum. Everybody wants an answer and they want it yesterday. But I don't know that that's either possible or wise. Council, this is a discussion item. It is not an item for action. But I would value your thoughts on the path forward.
Mr. Mayor, I would suggest them probably changing the MMPA standards because the MMPA, they don't actually have standards. There's a documentary on it called "The Film Is Not Yet Rated," and essentially it covers how they do it. A group of about 5 people watch the movie, and then they talk about it afterwards and decide what rating it is.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. That's a piece of information I do not have. So it's that sort of input that can prove valuable. My goal is to improve. Whatever we do, whether it's streets or this issue or whatever, that we improve. And I think we only do that when we do it carefully and with great thought. Anyone else? Mr. Kane, I thank you for taking on a large task. We were swapping emails yesterday, so I know you were working yesterday. As we were all preparing for this. I appreciate each one who has come out. I assume that most of you are not here for the boring part.